Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Stacy, and I'm a bookseller and the events coordinator at Belmont Books. Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of virtual events coming up, including Jen Bouchard launching her book First Course and discussing it with Crystal King on Monday, and an evening with Stacey Abrams, who will be discussing Our Time Is Now with Carrie Champion on Tuesday. You can register for these and our other events on our website, which is belmontbooks.com, and that is also where you can purchase all of tonight's books. If you have any questions for the authors, please type them into the Q&A section. And if they are author specific, please specify which author they are for, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. We're very excited to welcome this fabulous lineup of authors. I want to tell you a little bit about our moderator, Hank Phillippi Ryan, and then I will turn the event over to her and she will introduce our esteemed panel. Hank Phillippi Ryan is the USA Today bestselling author of 13 novels of suspense. She has won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 4 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. Her 2019 book, The Murder List, won the Anthony Award for Best Novel of the Year. Hank is also the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV and has won 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. Hank's novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple Magazine, and others. Her newest book is The First to Lie, and it got a starred review from Publishers Weekly and is now nominated for the Anthony Award for Best Novel and the Mary Higgins Clark Award. Hank's upcoming book, Her Perfect Life, will be out in September. And without further ado, I will turn the event over to all of you.
Thank you, Stacy. This is great. And how wonderful to see you all. I love seeing everybody in the audience. So many people are here tonight. John and Carla and Diane and Katie and Anissa and PJ Vernon is here. And hooray for your new book, PJ Bathhouse. It's great. And you all, what a treat to see you all here tonight from all over the country and from Canada. Hannah Mary McKinnon has organized this, and we want to congratulate Hannah right off the bat since her new book is just in the 2nd week of being a Canadian bestseller. So you will remember me. Hooray, Hannah.
Yay, thank you.
Really doing fabulously, and we love that. So welcome to all of you here tonight. We have, let me just tell you quickly who's here. It's raise your hand when I say your name. If you have your book with you, just hold it up. If you don't, that's good. Amina Akhtar is in Texas with Fashion Victim. Mary Kubica outside of Chicago with her new book, Local Woman Missing, which here I will hold that up. Local Woman Missing. Isabella Maldonado is here. Her new book, The Cipher, which I just lost on my iPad, is out, and she will have a new book coming up soon. Laura McHugh's What's Done in Darkness comes out in 5 days or some crazy thing like that. And Hannah Mary McKinnon's You Will Remember Me, out now. And oh yes, we both have it, perfect. As I said, a Canadian bestseller. So I want to welcome you all here tonight and talk to you a little bit about each of your books, and then we'll all talk about anything that anybody wants to talk about. And you audience, if I look over here, I'm looking at your comments. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, or you can sneak them in the chat if you want. I promise I will notice it. Kimberly's saying, yay, What's Done in Darkness, can't wait to read it. So that's on it. So you all be sure to look at the comments because people are saying wonderful things about you all. So Amina, let's start with you. Let me tell the audience that you are a former fashion writer and editor turned novelist. Your debut novel, #Fashion Victim, is a darkly funny, and I do mean darkly funny, satire of that glam world. And your next book, Kismet, is due out in the summer of next year. You know, Fashion Victim was so voicey and so fabulous. It looks like this, you all. Look how creepy that is. That is dark. That is dark. And
it's a dark book.
It is a dark book. The first line is, let me just read it to you all. The first line of it is, 3 blonde PR girls with iPads stood behind a velvet rope, slowly checking people in. I waited for one to glance up. I mean, that is so much attitude, instant setting. And since your book is all about voice and the setting, why did you decide to start at the velvet rope?
Because so much of my life has been spent in dealing with PR people. And look, love PR people, love you guys. But, you know, we're talking like every night you would go to 3 or 4 events for work, you know, and every time there's that check-in and you're just standing there. And so whenever somebody delays you, you know, because things happen, it throws off your schedule for the entire evening. So I thought, how can I make people feel and be part of this life that I've led, you know, and that was the way that came to me.
And it's so interesting because that velvet rope is either you're in or you're out, you know, just like fashion and just, you
absolutely.
Know, just like world. Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, as you guys all know, if you've seen, you know, Devil Wears Prada, or if you've seen any, you know, fashion reality show, there really is a hierarchy of being in, being cool. And if you're not cool, you kind of don't really go anywhere. I liken it to high school. It's very much like high school. You know, you got the cool girls who are doing the fashion shoots, and then you've got the band geeks who are doing copy and fact checking, you know? So you would try to figure out how you fit in, but every day, you know, you have to be dressed up. You have to be wearing your Manolos and your stilettos and looking perfect and thin. And it's intense.
Well, you certainly made your position clear in this book. Did you laugh and laugh as you were writing it?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that if my books make me laugh, anything I'm writing, then that's my goal. Like I want to have a good story and make people have a good time. And I thought, well, you know, with the fashion thing, we already have Devil Wears Prada. We didn't need a tell-all book about fashion. It wouldn't be that exciting. You guys have seen the movie or read the book. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be hilarious if a fashion girl, and this is not a spoiler, you guys, is the murderer? And nobody believes it because she's a fashion girl, and fashion girls are, you know, you think they're ditzy and they don't, you know, care about anything else. And it, you know, so I wanted to sort of prove that stereotype wrong.
And only among us could we say, wouldn't it be hilarious if a fashion girl was a murderer? You know, oh yeah, that'd be really funny.
Yeah.
You know, there is a mindset to that. Well, congratulations. I can't wait to read.
Thank you.
We all can't wait. Mary Kubica, let's talk to you next. Let me tell the audience that as if they didn't know, Mary Kubica is the New York Times bestselling author of 7 suspense novels, a former high school history teacher. Mary lives outside of Chicago with her husband and 2 children. And as I said, her new book is Local Woman Missing. Look at that sophisticated cover. That's so gorgeous. Let me read you the first page. Welcome, Mary. Let me read you the first line. And the first line is prologue, and that's interesting too, an interesting choice. 11 years before, it says, there's a smudge of lipstick on the collar of his shirt. She sees it. She says nothing about it. I mean, that is conflict and secrets and domestic intrigue right off the bat. Why did you decide to start that way? And tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so actually, the prologue was the last thing that I wrote for this book, which, you know, sometimes these things don't happen linearly. And I'm not a linear writer anyways. I kind of jump around a little bit from characters. And so I wrote the whole book, and, you know, I had of course developed a number of marital conflicts within this novel, but I wanted to start with just a really hopefully captivating scene, something to really, really draw the reader in. And many of my novels do begin with a prologue. And the next chapter is actually very dark and it's pretty emotional. And so I wasn't sure that I wanted to start on that note. So once I had, you know, a draft of the book, I kind of sat back and thought, how am I gonna really hook the reader from that very first page? And so it's sort of, it foreshadows something that's gonna happen later in the book. And I don't wanna give too much away, but I just knew that it really laid the groundwork for the story that was going to unfold, and hopefully just hooked that reader in right from the beginning.
I mean, it's literally called Local Woman Missing. So there's some stuff that is pretty obvious. But I loved how you, it's interesting because when you read the book and then go back and read the prologue, so many things in that prologue have so much more meaning, additional meaning.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not a plotter. So I usually have no idea where my stories are going to go as I'm writing them. And so it was actually really fun to write the prologue at the end, knowing exactly how the story was going to go, and to just kind of hint at some things that were going to happen later without giving too much away, to just, again, like, hopefully really grab the reader's attention and want them to read more to find out exactly what's happening in this opening scene.
And quickly, let me ask you, when you wrote the prologue, when you knew everything, did you sort of get goosebumps at the theme and the sort of overall story that you could tell in just that prologue?
Oh, I did, just because it kind of, it brings it all full circle, really, without giving too much away. It really does. And so I did. Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things that when I was writing the book, I didn't necessarily know that I was going to go back and add this prologue. But, once I decided to do it and I wrote the prologue, I did kind of get chills, because I felt like absolutely that was how the book needed to begin.
Sue Grafton used to call that the magic, when something would happen in the writer brain that they couldn't have predicted. And yet there it is, and it's perfect. We all sort of pray for that to happen. Kimberly is saying, I love the book Local Woman Missing. So great, all in all caps. Loved it. I couldn't guess where it was headed next. Thank you, Mary Kubica. You rock. So that's good. That's good, Kimberly. Isabella, welcome. I'm glad that you are here tonight from crazy hot Arizona. How hot is it?
118 degrees.
Is that, do you just melt when you go outside?
It's toasty. You stay inside pretty much. And even at night, it only cools down to 95 degrees at night. So yeah, you pretty much stay inside. That's what you do.
I guess so. Let me tell the group a little bit about you. Isabella Maldonado is a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico. She was the first Latina to attain the rank of captain in her police department. She retired as the commander of special investigations and forensics after 22 years on the force, and uses her extensive law enforcement background to bring a realistic edge to her writing. And that is quite the resume, I have to say, perfect for an author. So your first book in your series, The Cipher, which is what I have the cover of right here, came out last year, is that right?
Yeah, November.
In November. And you have a new book coming out in August, called A Different Dawn. Is that the title?
Right there behind me.
All right, hold that puppy up. All right, let's see that. I cannot wait. I made you ruin your complete background here. So.
Fine.
Let me read you the beginning, you all, the beginning of The Cipher. And it begins 10 years ago. And the setting is Fairfax County Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court of Virginia. And the first line is this: Nina Esperanza gazed up at the man who held her fate in his hands. And that is perfect because it's a pivotal moment. Something is about to happen that's going to change Nina's life. Tell us, and that's what the whole book is. So tell us why you started there and how meaningful that was to you.
Well, it was a little different from what Mary did, in that I actually wrote that first chapter first. I mean, I because it's a little bit of a different trajectory. And it really is actually a prologue. I just put chapter 1 on top of it because it happens 10 years before the story. But just mentally, I just wanted to make it chapter 1 because I guess I have this deep-seated fear that when people see the word prologue, they just skip through because I want to get to the story. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, they can't. If they miss it, they will absolutely be lost for most of the story. So I'm like, they have to read this. So I'm going to call it chapter 1, but really it is a prologue. But this is a pivotal moment in Nina's life where, all kinds of things are set in motion and everything changes for her. She is at a pivotal point where she is taking charge now. She is deciding that she is no longer going to be a victim. She is going to be a fighter. And that is what she declares at the end of the chapter. And that's what happens. And that's the beginning of her transformation.
How did you feel writing her transformation? I mean, it's such an empowering thing to have someone change. And I don't want to say anything more about that, but you can talk a little bit about what you want to say about that. How was that to write?
Well, you know, she is such a, she's a trauma survivor. And so obviously in the course of my job, I ran across so many trauma survivors. And I saw kind of how their journey went. Sometimes I would interact with them over a long period of time in their lives. And some, you know, it did not go well, and some it did amazingly well. And I kind of wanted to tell the story of someone who not just sort of gritted their teeth and suffered through it, but actually came out in many ways kind of through the crucible, came out much stronger than she ever would have been. And then went and I just wanted to show that there is this factor of resilience that I think that we often don't celebrate enough. And I wanted to celebrate that.
Yeah, and it comes across, so there's such a goosebumpy moment near the end of that chapter that I don't want to give away, but and you did such a great job with it. It's wonderful that you bring your expertise to that. So welcome tonight and good luck. Belmont Books, Stacy is saying that where you can pre-order A Different Dawn, and with the handy dandy link in the chat. So you know you'll want to do that. Laura McHugh, welcome, welcome, welcome. Laura is in Missouri, and she is the award-winning, internationally best-selling author of The Weight of Blood, Arrowwood, The Wolf Once In, and What's Done in Darkness, which is coming out June 22nd, tick, 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 like 5 days from now. Congratulations on that. Already a lot of buzz. Is it so hot in Missouri too?
It's only about 100 here, so now I feel guilty for complaining because Isabella is so much hotter. But yeah, it's pretty hot.
Yeah, it's summer, I guess, right? It's kind of summer.
Yeah.
At least we can go outside now a little bit. So it's interesting because the beginning of your book, I mean, it's one of the things that's fascinating about this, looking at the first lines, is how they completely give the feel and the voice of the story just from that first line. And this one, in The Weight of What's Done in Darkness, does it so beautifully. It starts out labeled Sarah Beth, That Day. The blacktop road stretched empty in either direction, the sky hazy and the air heavy as a sodden sponge. And that's so ominous and so atmospheric. And the road stretching out empty into either direction. Why did you start with this just moment of sort of holding your breath?
Yeah, we've been talking about prologues a little bit, and I had never written any sort of prologue at all. But with this book, Sarah Beth is living on this really isolated farm with her parents in this very religious community. And then she is abducted. And the book really begins, you know, it's 5 years later, and she's kind of looking back at these things, and there's something else going on in present day. But I really wanted to focus at the beginning, just on that moment. This is right before she's abducted, and that's what happens in this following scene. And so I just wanted to kind of have that, like you said, setting the scene. This is a very, you know, remote farm area in the Ozarks, and just kind of that open road. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen, what could be coming down that road. And of course, it's something terrible, obviously, that's coming down the road for her. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to start in that moment. And then from there, it kind of goes into present day, and then back, it goes back and forth.
And if it weren't something terrible about to happen, it wouldn't be a Laura McHugh book, right? I mean, that's,
of course, yeah.
And even the weight of the atmosphere is oppressive in this moment. And Sarah Beth is hoping that something good is about to happen, but because it's page one of your book, that's not going to happen. How was that to write that the poor girl who was already oppressed, and you'll all get this when you read the book. Now there's a moment in her life.
Yeah, and when this scene happens, as I mentioned, she's living at home with her parents. She's really wanting to escape this religious community where the girls have to wear the long dresses and the long hair, and they have to obey the men, and they have to smile, and they have to do whatever is expected of them. And she does not fit in with that. She does not want to do any of that, and she really wants to get out of there. And so when this is happening, she's sitting there at the roadside, and she's trying to think, how am I going to get out of here? I need to escape from this place. I want to get back to the real world. I want to start a real life. And of course, things don't ever turn out like you expect, because she gets snatched away from the side of the road.
And it's superly ironic because all she wants to do is get away.
Yeah, just not like that.
Exactly, not like that. Well, congratulations. Do you have pre-launch jitters?
I really don't this time. I don't know. I think part of it with so many things being virtual, and I'm not trying to plan any travel or anything like that, try to arrange what my kids are going to do. It's all pretty much just here at home. And I'm pretty lucky. I get to have a couple of small in-person events around the launch, which will be really fun. And so I'm excited about that. But yeah, I don't feel too nervous, not a lot going on. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited that it's finally here.
Well, it's getting great reviews. So, everybody is going to look forward to it. And I know that Stacy will put a link to your book as well. All of our books will have links in the chat. As Hannah and I say on First Chapter Fun, you just click on those links, not right now, but before the show is over, that would be wonderful. No pressure. It's just our career. It's all. So Hannah, welcome, and thank you for putting this panel together, and congratulations on your newfound bestsellerdom for you.
Thank you.
That's so great. That's so great. I love getting the text from you. It's on the list again. It's on the list again. How does that
I
feel?
forgot to look last week. It completely slipped my mind because it's on Wednesdays. No, seriously. And then I didn't forget this week. I did not forget, but I did forget last week till about 2:00, which was weird, but it's true.
And it's interesting because in those kinds of situations, you click, you're ready to click, and you know that when you click, you're either going to be really happy or start making rationalizations about why something didn't happen, right?
Yes.
So let me tell the world about you a little bit. Hannah Mary McKinnon was born in the UK, grew up in Switzerland, and now lives in Canada. Her suspense novels include The Neighbors, bestsellers Her Secret Son and Sister Dear, and her most recent psychological thriller, the Canadian bestseller You Will Remember Me. She lives in Oakville, Ontario, with her husband and 3 teenage sons. So chapter 1, page 1, line 1, and You Will Remember Me, is titled The Man from the Beach, who was one of the main characters, as it turns out. And your first couple of lines are cold. Cold was the first word that came to mind, the first thing I noticed when I woke up. So you take us right into this story where clearly there's a situation, and it's kind of seemingly a simple question. Why is he awakening on the beach? That's the domino. Talk a little bit about why you started there and with him.
Well, it was very clear from the beginning that this was going to be, I'll say it was clear at the beginning, and then I questioned my choice, and then I went back to my original choice to have 3 point of view characters. And I wanted it to open with the man on the beach who wakes up on the beach but doesn't know where he is, how he got there, or most interestingly, I think, who he is. So it immediately asks, who is this guy? What did he do? How did he get there? Why doesn't he know his name? And I think the first chapter is only about 2 pages. So it was very clear for me when I started writing the book that would be the first very short chapter, just somebody waking up, right into the action and into the questions of what the heck is going on.
It is interesting because he comes to the realization, you sort of allow the reader to come to the realization with him that he doesn't know who he is. And did you have to think about, and we want to talk about your amnesia situation, how to write that a little bit later, but as you became him, as you were writing, did your brain work in a different way as well?
Yeah, I had to really imagine what would that be like? First of all, waking up on a beach and it's cold and it's dark and it's the middle of the night and trying to figure out where you are. There are no lights, just sounds, and the brain already feeling a little bit muddled before finally realizing at the end of the first chapter that he can't remember anything. So I had to, because I've never had that experience, I had to really try and imagine how terrifying that would be, but how slowly or not you might come to the realization that you can't answer any of the questions in your mind about anything.
What a chilling, and forgive me, but it is chilling. What a chilling moment that is in the book, and for him to realize that that one thing that you rely on, that you know who you are, is gone.
Yes, exactly.
And Joyce is asking in the Q&A, Joyce is asking about how you each decided about that first line, and we've talked a little bit about that. But Hannah, is this the first moment is this the first time? Is this the first choice? Is what I'm trying to impossibly say. Was this your first choice of beginning? Did you settle on this line right away?
I think chapter 1 and the last chapter were the easiest to write, and everything in the middle was a nightmare. Too much. Not all of it. That's an exaggeration. But the first chapter was. I mean, I tinkered around with it and with the wording, of course, and everything. But I think if I go back to the very first draft, there wouldn't be that many changes. It was very clear how it would start, and I plot, so that does help. But yeah, the first and last were great, and then everything in between needed a lot of work.
Do you all feel that way? Is the first and last the easiest for you? Amina, you're nodding. Is the middle the mess? You're muted. We're reading Amina's. Let me undo you a little bit. Hold on. You're going to have to unmute yourself, Amina, or Stacy can.
Unmute. There we go.
There we go. Unmute.
Yeah.
We all read your lips perfectly in that statement that you.
That's why I wore red, so you could see them.
Right, exactly.
I knew what I wanted the beginning to sort of be, but my first line that I originally started with was further in the book where her Manolos are soaked in blood, and I was like, oh, that's a great image. But then I decided to not start with that right away. I know, for me, I have to know the ending, and I have to know where I'm going. It's like, what's the map? So I don't always plot things out, but I have to know the first chapter and the last chapter, and then everything else, the soggy middle, you gotta.
Do you all feel that way too, Mary? I see you nodding. What part are you nodding at?
Yeah, the middle part, I feel like the beginning is new and exciting, and I usually don't know my ending, but I'm so excited to get there and write it. Once I figured out what the twist is going to be and how the book is going to wrap up, I'm really excited to write that. But that middle part, this 200 pages in the middle or whatever it winds up being, you have to keep that suspense. You don't want your reader to get bored in there, so you have to keep adding new mysteries and introducing new characters or whatever it is that you need to do to just keep that suspense as strong it is in that first chapter and in that last chapter, and that can be a daunting task sometimes.
Completely. The middle, you get to this point and you're typing along so quickly, and then you think, oh man, I have 250 pages to go. What is going to happen? But I wonder, Isabella, if writing police procedural type books, detective stories, does that make the middle easier?
Well, yeah, I have a different take. Again, I mean, probably everyone else here has a MFA, and instead I've got, police. Okay, good. Okay, now I don't feel so. Okay. But so what I do is, the old debate: are you a pantser or a plotter kind of thing? It seems like, because I guess, and I guess if there's anyone listening who isn't sure what those are, a plotter is someone who plots out, to the nth degree. Probably the most famous plotter would be James Patterson. He's famous for plotting his novels out very meticulously. And then on the other end of the spectrum is a pure pantser. Probably one of the most famous pantsers is Stephen King and Hank. Yeah, very famous. Right up, Stephen King and Hank right there together. Yeah. And so, but, and there's everything in between. But what I do, I guess, because those two terms are not ridiculous enough, I would call myself a ploncer. So what I do is I figure out a couple of major plot points. So I know where the book's going to begin. I have an idea of what's going to happen at about the 25% mark. And I have some midpoint crisis that I want to happen to the character. And then I know what I want to happen at the climax. And I kind of know where it's going to end. And that's it. And how I get to these mile markers, I could, I'm going from Arizona to Washington, D.C., let's say, and I have these mile markers I want to hit, but I could deviate and go all the way down through Texas or all the way up through Nebraska, or I don't know how I'm going to get there. So that's a mix.
Stephen, Dennis Lehane used to talk about that when he was thinking about his novel, he would know A and M and Z.
Yeah.
And then everything, all the other letters had to fill in. Laura, where do you fall in this knowing the ending, hating the middle debate?
Yeah, like when I started writing my first book, I didn't know what was going to happen on the next page. I knew nothing. I didn't plan anything. I didn't plot anything. It all just kind of grew, as I was writing. And I've tried to become a little more intentional and a little more structural. I really can't plot something out in advance very well, not the whole story anyway, but like they were talking about, I'm doing a little bit better about, I know where I'm starting out and I kind of know where I want things to end up. And I'm in the squishy middle right now of my new book. And that's like, Mary, I think you said like, oh gosh, I have all these pages left, I just want to get to that end. I know what happens. I've already written the end. So I'm like, yay. So now I'm just kind of trying to work backwards and just make sure I have all the things that I need to have in the middle. And I think I changed it. My procedure that I do kind of grows and changes a little bit with each book. I feel like I'm a little more structural now, but I still would call myself a pantser for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started out as complete, having no idea at all, at any point what was going to happen at all. And every ending was a huge surprise to me. And people would say, wow, the ending of that book, you really surprised me. And I'd say, yeah, who'd have thought that would happen? It really surprised me. But I know Hannah is completely, you don't even want to hear what Hannah does. It's so crazy, but let's hear it. The ultimate plotter, the opposite of me. Talk a little bit about that, Hannah. It's just astonishing.
I'm a little misorganized, much to the chagrin of my three kids. Not in terms of my writing, but getting them organized. So I start off with a beginning and an end. Like I need to know the ending. If I have an idea, a beginning, and I'm noodling it around, kind of a concept, I need to know what the end is, because otherwise, how am I going to get there? How am I going to know how this works? So then I have this is going to sound so nerdy, a 4-plot point planner. So instead of having beginning, middle, and end, there's beginning, something happens, it's even worse, middle, end. Then I expand that to 7 points. Then I expand that to 16. And then I expand those 16 to about 30 chapters, 32 chapters. And then when I start writing, I break those down into a few bullet points per chapter, because that way, so say I have 30 chapters, I know I have to write about 2,000 words-ish, gives me about 60,000 words, because I write up, I'll add another 50%. 50% on top of 60,000 gives me 90,000 words, which is what I need. So all of a sudden it feels manageable, because if I did what you do, Hank, and just sat down and thought, or Mary, I'm going to write and see where it goes, I would end up meandering around. I'd never make it anywhere. I need to know where I'm going. So I know it sounds really a little bit insane, but it works.
But that's one of the fascinating things, and that's why I love to talk about this, is that every writer's brain works differently. And people talk about what's the best way to do it. And, we all say, don't we, whatever works for you is what works. But in writing still, there's so much more than structure and outline. There are always these obstacles that come up for a particular book that you maybe didn't realize that you were going to have to face, or something that changed that made a big difference in your book? And I'm stalling a little bit here, vamping, to let you think about what, if there are moments in your book that you think, ooh, how am I going to get out of that? Or you wrote yourself into, whether it's in your manuscript or in your outline, a place that was more difficult than you thought it would be. Mary, are you nodding because you have an answer, or nodding because you're saying, please don't call on me?
No, I actually could have an answer, but it's not for Local and Missing, because I have to say that that book was just like the best behaved child. Like it just worked, and that never happened. So I don't know. It was one of my favorite writing experiences, because everything really did just go right. But the book before it, The Other Misses, that it was going really well, but then I was basically done with it when I decided to add an entire character who's a really integral part of the story. If anybody's read it, it's a girl named Imogen. And so she's a huge part of the story, and I wanted more attention to this story. And
she was added? Are you kidding me?
She was added. I mean, the book was done and she was added. And it was, I think, one of the biggest hurdles that I've had to kind of overcome in writing a book, just because she lives with the primary family in this story. She's a child that they've gotten guardianship of. And so I have to account for her, in every scene. Either she needs to actually be there, or, or I have to say where she is. If she's not at dinner, where is she? And she becomes such an important part of the story. So to work her in, at that point in the writing process, and then to also at the same time ditch, like probably 20,000 words to make room for her, was a really huge task. But, now that it's done, I cannot envision that book without her in it.
Isn't that so? I mean, somebody was saying that Gone Girl, that Gillian Flynn put the diary in Gone Girl after she had written the book.
Wow.
That was added afterward. Did you know this? Does anybody know if this is true? This is what I heard at some point. And Acadia is saying Imogen is one of my favorite characters of all time. So that's pretty awesome. Anyway, who else did any of you have a situation that you had to face? I mean, Amina, did you, in the fashion world, did you worry that your pals were going to wonder about this?
Yeah, I mean, everybody asked if I was wanting to murder them. And I mean, the answer would depend on who it was, to be honest. But I think one of the things, because I had never written a novel before, and I was transitioning out, because as we know, the lifestyle media world is kind of, going down, and there's layoffs everywhere. And I thought, well, why don't I just try writing a book and see what happens? So I had no idea how to do this. I literally just sat at my computer and wrote out little scenes. And for me, the second I can hear a character's voice and thoughts in my head, that's when, it starts to become real. My second book, Kismet, which was out next year, I definitely had to plot that out a little bit more, because there's a lot more different characters and different points of view. And I just, wanted to make sure everyone, was the way I wanted them and the way they were in my head. But for Fashion Victim, I just sort of and I don't, this is a terrible term, but I just sort of vomited it all out, and just sat there and doing it. But as I'm going and writing more books, I'm kind of trying to plot things, but I tend to be a pantser all the way.
And it's interesting because Laura was sort of alluding to the fact that she started out one way and went another way. But you wrote about deeply religious, serious belief. How did you deal with that respectfully, and how did you research that?
In Fashion Victim, or?
Oh no, I'm talking about Laura.
Oh, okay, sorry.
My characters are not.
I was like, wait a minute.
Sorry.
So yeah, I'm writing about this family who joined this really, really strict sort of evangelical church, which is almost like a cult-like church. And I didn't want to make this a stereotypical thing and be, bashing any sort of religion or anything like that. But I live in the Bible Belt. I grew up in the Bible Belt. I've been around, when I was growing up, everyone I know went to church, all different kinds of churches, and I visited different kinds of churches with my friends. And I was always kind of interested in some of the ones that seemed a little more different and fun, like talking in tongues, things like that. I thought that was really fascinating because I went to Catholic, and it's very quiet, and you're just kneeling and you're quiet and praying, you know, so things like that I thought were really interesting all along. But I know most of you have probably seen those shows on TV, the Duggar family and those other families that have all the children and live a certain lifestyle. I was kind of interested in that and started going down that path. And just started thinking, you know, what about a girl who is kind of isn't brought up in this from the time she's a baby? You know, she comes into this around middle school, and what would it be like? Like if you weren't brought up in that your entire life and you're thrust into it as a woman, would you acclimate to that? Would you rebel against that? And of course, she does not fit in there. And so I was trying to show different sides of it and show people who had grown up in that kind of culture and they were okay with it. You know, that was their life. But on the other hand, also showing all the reasons why, as a woman, you might not want to live that sort of lifestyle.
I mean, did you feel apprehensive about getting it just right? How did you do that?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I got it just right, and I'm sure I'll get criticism, you know, from various sides. That's always possible when you're writing. And I tried to just do it, like I said, without stereotyping and without trying to exploit that aspect in any way. But I did kind of want to show some of the real underlying issues and the potential for abuse and crimes and that sort of thing in that sort of community. And that's something I have run into before. I'm writing about crimes, I'm writing about dark things. So whatever community I'm writing about, there's going to be bad people and crimes. And sometimes people take that personally. So I try to be like, you know, I'm always writing about crimes and bad people. There are bad people.
That's what we do, right? That's what we do. That's why you're reading crime fiction, you all.
Yeah, that's why you're reading it. And so I'm not trying to, you know, criminalize a certain group of people or anything. It's just wherever I set a story, you know, they're going to be bad people and dark things happening. So hopefully,
you know, we have to be aware that when someone is killed, that victim is an important person and part of the world, and someone loved them, and there was, you know, something important happened to them. It's not just a way to make a crime story work. You know, Isabella, you must think about that a lot when you're writing the books that you do. I saw you nodding when Laura was talking. How does that relate to you?
I do, because obviously in the course of my work, I mean, I had to deal with the survivors of, you know, crimes. Whether, you know, obviously if it's a homicide, then it would be the family, but, you know, other kinds of crimes, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to be respectful of that. And so I do try to make sure that I pay close attention to the ramifications. Nothing happens without ramifications. And the other thing, you know, you were talking about how you try to address different things that are occurring in your book as you're writing yourself into corners and stuff. And for me, it's a little bit different because a lot of cops read my books. A lot of regular people do too, but a lot of cops, and they I think they hold me to a higher standard. So far, so good. They're, you know, they've been very, very happy. But I know that I'm expected to get these procedures right, and so there are times where I have to, in order to make sure I get it right, I have to do a lot of research, which, you know, you're like, geez, well, you know, you were doing the job for 22 years, you know, but that doesn't matter. You still do the research. And there was, as a matter of fact, just recently for the second book, A Different Dawn, I had to call up someone that I know on the SWAT team, and he came over to my house all geared up in his SWAT gear. And I put on the night vision equipment and everything because I wanted to do a scene with night vision. And you know, in my position, I really hadn't done a lot of night shooting. I mean, I had done some, but not that much with the SWAT gear. So I needed to, you know, to really understand what that was like, you know. So I had to put that on. We turned out all the lights and everything and dimmed it, and then I got to do. And it's amazing. I had outdated information about what night vision was like. And that's the other thing, is that technology changes so quickly. You know, my last position, I was the commander of special investigations and forensics, but I still had to go to the forensic lab and talk to the lab director on a regular basis and find out what's going on, because the stuff is changing like by the month, it seems like. It is research is so important that way.
It's so funny. I'm thinking, okay, raise your hands, you all. How many of you have done night shooting with the SWAT team? No.
No, but I'd like to.
Yeah,
Sounds
sign
really
me
fun.
up.
Sounds really fun. Hannah, you, and talking about difficult parts of your book, you decided to write about amnesia.
Yeah.
How good of an idea was that?
At the beginning, great. And then once I'd started, not so great. And it caused me a number of, so it wasn't the amnesia in itself. It was the fact that I had a linear timeline. So nothing that flips, chapters that flip past and present, but all moving forward. And my point of view character has amnesia. So I'd built this wonderful backstory for him. I knew who he was. I knew where he'd come from, where he'd gone to school, hear his favorite joke, because I interview my characters. Like I said, I'm a bit nerdy. And of course, I couldn't let him know any of that. He was not allowed to know any of it. And that was hard. And I hadn't, even though I'd plotted it extensively and I thought about it and I'd interviewed my characters and I'd built all of that out, I had not thought about, not even for a second, well, what's it going to be like writing from a point of view of someone who has no memory? It's ridiculous when I think about that. How could I not think about that? But I really didn't. And the first chapter was fine. And then the second chapter was okay. So his chapters. And I thought about the third or fourth, I thought, oh no, this is going to be really hard.
Because we all rely on the backstory of the character for motivation. You know, he did this because he lost his dog when he was a little boy, or she did this because of that. But if he doesn't know why he's doing things.
That's right. And also, so and you will remember me, there are 3 point of view characters. So, and they're all about balance. They will have about 30,000 words. So with the man from the beach, or with 3 characters, you have 30,000 words to really get into that character's head, because in the other 60,000, you're discovering the character through other people's eyes. And then limiting that further by him not knowing who he is and not being able to have people sit him down and feed him his life story was a challenge, as was there's some opioid stuff in there, which I have no experience with. And fellow author A.F. Brady, she read through it because she's a psychotherapist and knows a lot about addiction counseling and whatnot. And she wrote back, she said, "You've never met a drug dealer, have you?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, they don't show up on time, they're not really polite, and they don't give you what you ask for."
3 big things to remember. Next time you can call Isabella as well. I'm sure she knows that stuff.
Yes, please. Yeah. So there are a number of challenges.
So no more amnesia books for you, or now you have this down now?
Well, I'll never say never, but not for a while, I think. Now I understand how it works and how to do it, but I wouldn't necessarily want to repeat the process again in the all too near future.
Yeah, forgive me, I'm looking down at you and I realize looks like I'm looking in a funny place, but I'm looking at each of you as you talk and makes me not look at the camera. I was interested in what you were saying, Amina, earlier about how as your professional world changed, you decided to write a book. And that isn't what many people would decide to do. I mean, it's a huge daunting task to write a book. And it's kind of a mixture of, crazy naivete and super confidence. I wonder what each of you, if you could tell us, what was that moment? And I'll start with you, Amina, when you thought, I could write a book and I can do it. That's the thing that I think about.
I think part of it was I had no idea what else to do. I literally was like, I've worked in the fashion world for so long. What skills do I have that could work elsewhere? And I honestly hit a total wall with that. And at the same time, I was dealing with personal things. My mother had passed away. So I was, at this moment where I wasn't really leaving my apartment very often. I would just sit there and be like, what am I doing? Figure this out. And I said, you know what? Let me give myself 1 year. 1 year, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write, and let's see what happens. And maybe nothing happens from it. Maybe this is just a fun exercise, but maybe it will lead to something. I literally had nothing to lose. So why not try it? And I think that's something I tell anyone who wants to write, try it. What's the worst that could happen is, oh, someone doesn't like what you wrote. Okay, that's fine. We all deal with that. But, if you don't try it and you don't do it, you'll never find out. So I think it wasn't confidence so much as, well, this is the only thing I can think of. So.
Well, but it's interesting because not everybody would think that was the only thing. I mean, some people would watch TV
Yeah.
and get a job somewhere else. Was there a more, I know that when I write my books, when I do the editing, and I promise you this has a point, as I'm editing, there's a point where I get to where I think, wait a minute, I'm just reading this book. I forgot that I wrote it. I'm just reading the story. Did you get to a point in Fashion Fiction when you thought, hey, this is kind of a good book?
That's when I'm ready to share it with somebody to read, and get their points of view. And usually it takes me a while to let anyone even look at it. And when I'm making just tiny edits, that's when I'm like, all right, somebody can read this and give me feedback and tell me if I'm absolutely insane or if this actually works, or both, probably. So yeah, definitely.
That's when you start taking away the and then putting in the, taking away that.
Mm-hmm.
And or but. Mary, when did you start writing? You were a teacher. When was the moment that you thought, I've got this idea?
I was just one of those kids that wrote from the time I was like 10 or 11 years old. And it was just something to pass the time. I'd come home from school and we had a typewriter back then. I'd get the typewriter and just work on something, but it was always very private to me. It wasn't anything. I never thought that I'd want to be an author. I barely shared my work with my parents. So like the idea of trying to get something published and all that was just beyond me. But I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So I, went that route. And I was teaching for a number of years. And then my daughter was born back in 2005. And I left my teaching career for what I thought was going to be just, a period of time while I started my family. And it was like literally days after my daughter was born. In retrospect, I have no idea how I did this, but I got the idea for The Good Girl, which is my first published book. And I started writing it. And I think I was partway through the novel when it hit me, I want to finish this book and I want to try and do something with this book. I had never had the urge to do that. And I never felt like I wanted to share my work with really anybody, but there was just something that I fell in love with the characters and the story. And so I wanted to try, and it worked out.
It's interesting because I just got goosebumps when you said that, because there's no feeling like having a good idea and knowing it's a good idea. And there's a thing that and do you have this, Laura, that you know when you're on the right track of something? When your first book, when you started writing, why did you decide to do that? And was it because you just had a good idea?
No, I had no idea at all. And I had been, like Mary, I've been writing all my life. I had been writing forever. I loved writing. But I was a first generation college student from a very working class home, and I didn't know anyone who did anything creative. And to me, the idea of being a starving artist, that's all I had in my head. Like, if I'm just going to try to write books or something, like I can never make a life that way. I didn't even try to do it. I ended up becoming a software developer. So I was writing insurance software in a basement with a bunch of guys for like 10 years of my life. And then I was still writing just kind of for myself on the side, but I lost my job when I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I was trying to interview while pregnant, and it was Christmas time. It was just a disaster. And so my husband said, you've always wanted to write a book. Maybe do that now, while you have a toddler and about to have a newborn at home and you have no job. But anyway, we thought, I'll take a year of my life and stay home with the kids, and I'll try to write a book. And it was funny because my husband would be like, how's that book going? And he'd be lurking over my shoulder, and I'm typing and I'm like, oh, it's going great. I did not have characters. I did not have a story. I had nothing. I started writing about the Ozarks, the setting. And that's where the book came from. And within a year, I had my draft, I revised, I got an agent. But if you had asked me when I first started writing that book, if I thought it would turn out like this and I would be a writer now and have my fourth book coming out, I I wouldn't have guessed that's what would happen. But
Was that
I
The
would
Weight of
regretted
Blood?
it. I didn't try.
Was that The Weight of Blood? Was that the book that you were writing?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so it shows you, I mean, even that atmospheric setting has been your trademark now throughout. Interesting how that, I mean, so not randomly, but I mean, I know Hannah, you talk about dealing with a significant other in some way, and them, you know, they were the ones who would say, go ahead and do this, which is sort of what happened to you, Hannah.
Yeah, so my story is a little bit of a combination of Amina's and Laura's, in the sense that I loved writing when I was a kid, but was very business career driven and followed that path until we came to Canada in 2010, and I started up my own business that crashed and burned. So I mean, as failures go, it was spectacular, fireworks all around. It was fantastic, but it left me very lost and wondering what to do. And Rob, my husband, he said, well, you could go corporate again and not see the kids and all the rest of it, which is what I'd done. And one of the reasons why we came to Canada, so that we had a better balance. And he said, well, you said you wanted to write. That's what you've kind of said. Well, do it now. If you don't do it now, you probably won't do it, will you? And I thought, okay, it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. And here we are. He was right. You were right, Rob. You were right.
Rob was right. We love Rob. I mean, it is interesting sometimes when someone just says, you know, yeah, you can do that. And you think, oh, okay. Isabella, was that how it worked with you? Or was this just your own idea and your own volition? Or how did that happen that you decided to, and it's a big deal to write a book.
Yeah, it was definitely my own deal, my own volition, all that. For me, I always wanted to write ever since I was a kid. I always enjoyed doing that, but my law enforcement career took up so much of my time. I was constantly on call and constantly, you know, all over the place. And so I ended up taking an early retirement to have a family, because I didn't even have time for a family. And so I did that. And then I thought, okay, now that I have a family here, I have my little one and whatever, I thought, well, maybe I can finally have the time to write in between taking care of my little one. But the impetus for writing for me was especially after watching and investigating and be involved with crimes and criminals and criminal activity. The truth of it is this, that crime is truly senseless. You talk about senseless violence, it is so senseless. In reality, people are murdered over the stupidest things, the most ridiculous things. Life is snatched away. It's so senseless. And I thought, you know what? This is why people have asked me, why don't you write true crime? I mean, you would seem like a logical person to do that. But at that time, and you know, I was not interested in true crime. I wanted to write fiction. And I had a very strong reason for doing that. And that is because I wanted to write things the way they should turn out and not the way they do turn out.
Do you all feel that way, that we write to have some control over the world in a kind of a way? Or is it fun? Or is it I mean, I remember when I got the idea for my first book, gosh, 15 years ago, when I was 55, and I came home and said, my husband, I said to my husband, I've got a great idea for a novel. I'm going to write a novel. And Jonathan said, great, sweetheart. Do you know how to write a book? And I'm like, how hard can it be? You know, I've read a million of them. And it was so hard. It was so hard. But there was that moment in writing it where I thought, this is kind of a good idea. You know, this could work. And I can make and the end was the surprise to me. And that was life-changing. That moment was life-changing. When you, and I know we're wrapping up now and we want to look at a couple of questions that readers have, but when you look at your books that you have now, is it strange to see, like, you know, someone in the, Mary, someone is saying, Erin is saying, The Good Girl is one of my favorite psychological suspense books of all time. And Kimberly's saying The Weight of Blood was an amazing read. Great, great book. And here are real people saying real fabulous things about your real book. What do you think about that?
It's amazing. And I have to say, I've seen comments coming in on the chat, and I'm not tech savvy enough to speak and type at the same time. But I am so grateful for all these kind comments that are coming in. And I mean, it means the world. I think that, you know, when we write, we're so in our heads with our characters, and we don't get to share it at that stage. So then when the books go out there and people read them and we get feedback, you know, and we hear that a reader loved one of our characters or were moved by a storyline or surprised by a twist, that just means everything. You know, that's the reason that we write.
I mean, what do you all think? Olive, keep talking about this, because I do think that there's this moment where you see that you actually, you know, like Amina said, I think I'm going to try it. What can it hurt? And then it actually works, and it's actually great, and you actually get great reviews and people want more of that. What do you think about that?
It feels unreal, to be honest. My sister asked me this the other day. She said, did you ever think that this is what your life would be? And I was like, no. I was like, I still think someone's gonna, you know, pinch me and wake me up, and I'm gonna be, you know, back at a job I don't like, you know. But you have to take that leap of faith and see what happens. And you know, it could surprise you. You know, life could go in a really fun direction if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, I keep picturing you in the basement with the 10 guys writing insurance software, which is just crazy. But it's work too, isn't it? Writing a book is difficult.
Yeah. And it's not totally unlike software. I mean, you have to keep these threads going and all of that. But, you know, like you mentioned, that moment where you get something from a reader, and someone sent me a picture. She had gotten The Weight of Blood tattooed on her arm, the book. And there was like a stack of books where you could see the spines and read the titles and things, but then The Weight of Blood was facing out. Like that was the thing.
Wow.
On her arm. And it just,
Wow.
The way that it felt, it's like, oh my gosh, my work resonated with someone, at least one person out there, you know, really made this connection. And that, yeah, that feels so good. And it makes it feel worthwhile, and that you're not just sitting there, just kind of writing, throwing this into the void. You know, there are people out there who are reading it and appreciating it. So yeah.
Well, if I could jump in on that too. It was really surprising for me, and I had no idea how much it was going to resonate. And then, you know, you put it out there, you're not sure how it's going to be received or what's going to happen. And, you know, with the cipher in particular, it's like now all of a sudden, I mean, it just goes crazy. And, you know, tens of thousands of reviews, and, you know, people commenting and stuff, how much it meant to them. And then, of course, then Hollywood calls and they want to turn it into a motion picture, and an A-list actor is signed up to star in it. And, you know, all of a sudden it's like you're reading about this in Variety, and, you know, the movie Hollywood deals. It's like, okay, this is really something now. This is taken.
Turns out that was a good idea. That was a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And you had to sort of give up something to get it.
Indeed, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And my husband laughs at me. Every single book I write, I'm convinced is the worst thing that was ever put out. I mean, I got really bad imposter syndrome, and he's like, okay, what, you know, is it? You know, I'm busy writing another one right now, and I'm on deadline. I got to turn it in like July, and, you know, and he's like, oh, you know, he's kind of laughing at me because I'm like, oh no, this is it. This is the one that's going to end my career for sure.
How many of us feel that way? Every time.
I feel better.
Every day, just call me. We'll all talk about this. And Hannah, finally, you know, you clicked a button and you're on the bestseller list. And you started, I mean, that's great. And that's amazing. And what do you tell yourself when that happens?
Well, when it happened the first time, I had no idea. That was with Her Secret Son 2 years ago, and it was Jennifer Hillier. She sent me a message, said, "Have you seen you're on the bestseller list?" And I wrote something back that I will not repeat because it wouldn't be ladylike. And I didn't believe it, and that was quite astonishing. And then last year, Sister Dear as well, and then this year, You Will Remember Me, and it's just, you know, the first time it's crazy, and then the second time you hope you will,
Yeah.
But because if you don't, it's going to really hurt, and then you do, and so it's really quite extraordinary. And I think I remember saying to Rob, I mean, of course, you know, I'd love the TV deals and the movie deals and all that, but what I would really like, you know, at the beginning of the book, you have your list of other works. So there, right? You have the list of your books. I want to get to 10. That's my goal. That's my next goal. Then I'll move it. Then it'll be 15 or 20 or whatever it is. But because I continually shift them. But I said to Rob, I'd like to open my own book and see a list of 10 other books. So that would be 11. So I'm not there yet.
Well, we will all get together again to celebrate your 10th, and all of our 10ths, and that'll be fun.
But you're already there and past and beyond.
Yeah,
You're at 13 now.
It's completely crazy. And my next book is due in September. and I know that that's definitely going to happen. But my book, The Perfect Life, just as you said, I was convinced that I will never be finished and this would be the most terrible book that has ever crossed the universe. And my husband said, "You always say that, sweetheart." And I said, "Yeah, but this is the time, this is the time." And he says, "You always say that too." So yay, you all. We have a couple of quick questions, and I know we're almost running out of time, but Stacy was saying we could go a tiny bit longer. Katie Mursky is saying, which author or authors influence you the most? That is an interesting question. Really quickly, lightning round. Can you think of anybody? Just pop in with some author that
David Nichols.
Caroline Kepnes, yeah.
Caroline.
Oh, Caroline Kepnes, interesting.
She's so voicey, yeah.
Jennifer Hillier, someone said. Who else?
Yeah, Jennifer Hillier, but also David Nichols for dialogue, who does not write crime, but his dialogue is extraordinary and I love it.
Anybody that you love, Laura?
Shirley Jackson. We've always lived in the castle. That was a book that really stuck with me, and I really liked that. Yeah.
I can see that. How about you, Isabella?
I will go with two of them, J.A. Jans and Eleanor Taylor Bland.
Oh,
so those are two that were very
yeah.
good.
I just love how these people have influenced you, and you can see that so clearly. How about you, Amina?
Oh, I love Caroline Kepnes.
Oh, you were
I
saying.
love voicey. I love, falling in love with a character. For me, voice is almost top of everything. So, her books really do it.
And you can really hear that in your book. It's quite astonishing. Karen Carr, and this will be the last question because I love this. There's a question about audiobooks, about how do you select an audio narrator? And that's done by the publisher, right? And how do you feel? I need to ask, this is so crazy, but Meredith wanted to know that. And now I'm thinking, how did you feel when you heard the person reading your book in audiobook? Mary, you're smiling.
So I don't know if it's the same for you, but I do get to pick. I get a couple excerpts from different narrators, and then I select which narrator I would like. And it's amazing, because I think that first time you hear them, even if you're just hearing the sample work that the publisher sends for you to choose from, when you're writing the book, you have a voice in your head for these characters. So the minute I, play that recording, it's either right or it's wrong. You can just kind of feel in your gut that this is the right voice for this character. And it's amazing. I listen to audiobooks and I know how important that narrator is. So it's a fun process.
Yeah, it is interesting because when I first heard my first audiobook a million years ago, and I thought, oh, that's wrong. And then I realized I had heard my voice the whole time. And now, just like you, I get to choose, and there'll be one and you think, okay, that could work. And then you hear another one and I think, oh, Lily, that's Lily. And it's just, I burst into tears in O'Hare Airport, actually, listening to it because I thought, oh, my book has come to life. And so oh no, who did? Let me just make sure I know who asked the question because it was really a good one. Hold on, I'm moving the question thing. Karen asks our last question, which is, and I love this, do you all like your new jobs?
Yes.
Very much.
I would
Very
say
much.
way better than wrestling with drunks and trying to take them to jail or, interviewing perverts or, locking people up. Oh yeah, this is definitely way better. All of the violence is inside my head.
And you can't beat the commute.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. It's been great. You all are so generous and so fun and so terrific. This pandemic time has been so insanely, ridiculously terrifying. And I always say it's always safe inside a book. And I feel that with all of you, that we, all of you here on the panel and all of you here in the audience, I really feel that we all share that. And my final note tonight would be, this is an independent bookstore who hosted us here tonight, the fabulous Belmont Books. And there are links to all of our books in the chat, which I hope you will look at. And again, have a wonderful rest of the evening. Stacy, and thanks to all of you. Stacy, I will turn it back over to you for the final good night.
Thank you. Hannah, first of all, I want to thank you for spearheading this amazing effort and
My
getting
pleasure.
this all together. It was such a great idea. And Hank, as always, you did an amazing job. You're such a good moderator. And I thank all of the other panel participants. It was really, truly a great event. And I thank all our audience members for joining us for really just such a fun event. I hope you all stay safe and have a great night. And we hope to see you at future events. Good night.
Good night. See you next time.
Good
Thank you.
night. Thank you.